Motorcycles have really always been a part of my life, but I'm kind of a late bloomer as far as actually riding. My dad was very much against motorcycles, and so I was never allowed to have one, especially as a kid. Dreaming of having a mini bike or something along those lines, and that was unfortunate. So I always had kind of had in the back of my mind when I was old enough and on my own and paying my own way, first thing I was going to do was buy a Harley-Davidson. So my name is Bill Rodencal. I'm the lead for museum collections at the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and work at the Harley-Davidson Archives. I was raised on a pretty steady diet of 1970s motorcycle movies. When I was a kid, they were on TV all the time, like, Little Foss and Big Halsey, CC and Company with Joe Namath, and of course, Saturday afternoons, kind of being force-fed Evel Knievel, jumping something different every Saturday afternoon on Wide World of Sports to kind of add the catalyst to that. I'm the baby of the family, so my brothers and sister are all a lot older than I am. My parents are kind of World War II era people, and so my oldest brother, was in college in the early 70s, and he had a 1972 Harley-Davidson FX Superglide and rode with a bunch of guys. And so right after college, he kind of lived in Chicago, and he and the guys would ride up to visit, mom and dad on the weekend, and we'd have all these motorcycles in our driveway. And the one that really I'll never forget, he had a buddy named G, and he had a white Sportster chopper with like a 10 over Springer on it, and it was just, as being like a 7-year-old kid, it was the greatest thing on earth. And then having them pop you on the seat of that and let you sit on that that's it. If that doesn't do it for you, nothing will. I'm part of a 3-generation automobile dealership. My grandfather started it in the 20s, and then my dad came there in the 50s, and then my brother in the mid 70s, and then I came I was worked there as a kid, but came there full time in the early 90s. So I was always around cool cars, and my dad built airplanes, so I was always involved with that and helping him. And so I was always into, mechanical things, and started as a mechanic at the dealership in high school. And then when I really, after college, I came back and took over with my brother and bought my first Harley-Davidson and restored that. And that was really the beginning of it. I had a really good friend who had a 1944 Knucklehead and would go to swap meets with him when I was looking for parts for the Sportster, and just got the bug for old Harley-Davidsons. There's a lot to be said about the timelessness of the look of them. And I love all great timeless things, like a 1936 Cord or a 32 Duesenberg, the Winnie Mae, great airplanes, great cars, great motorcycles. And I'd restored cars and everything. And motorcycles were just so great because they took up less space. You could put them in a bead blast cabinet. You could do all the things. They weren't rusty like as much as cars were, at least Wisconsin cars. So I really got that bug for antiques, and got my first antique in, I believe it was about 98, and restored that all in. The chips were all in. And so I started a business machining and manufacturing parts, because there were a lot of parts I couldn't get. So I started kind of remanufacturing obsolete parts and selling them to people all over the world. And that's what really, got me entrenched pretty deep in it. Literally the week after the 100th anniversary, which I was at, came home and I was looking through a magazine. It's still out there today. It's called Walnick's Classic Cycle Trader, and it's where people buy and sell old motorcycles. and there was an ad in there, and it said wanted motorcycle restorer first shift, and showed it to my wife. Wasn't looking for a job, was completely happy where I was at, and she was happy with her family business. But when we would sit at swap meets, me and my buddies, we'd always laugh, like, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And my joke always was, well, somebody has to restore motorcycles at Harley, don't they? And never even thinking it was an actual real job. And so I showed it to my wife. She says, you got to put a resume in. So I put my resume in, never even thinking I'd get a phone call. Had a couple of phone interviews and didn't hear anything. And finally in November, they called me and said, come on down, we want to meet you. And had an interview. And I didn't think it actually went so well, but got home and didn't hear anything for another month or so. And they called me up and they said, do you want to come to work for Harley-Davidson? And they said, you got to let us know right now. And I said, I'm on my lunch break, I got to at least talk it over with my wife. So they gave me till 8 o'clock the next morning, and I talked over with my parents and my wife, and here we are 17 years later, still doing the same job that I came there to do. Basically it's grown. There were 3 of us when I started, and we're down to just me now. We needed more then because we were really getting the collection prepared for the museum that they knew it was inevitable at that time. My job's changed obviously with the museum, but in a nutshell, I guess I'm the caretaker of the company's historic bike collection at this point in time. There's been people before me, there'll be people after me. One thing, actually the kind of main really great thing about the Harley-Davidson historic vehicle collection and their archival collection, which a lot of people don't realize, is most of it is what I always call brand new, meaning they saved it from the beginning. So when you come to the museum and you see our 1911 single that's right there as you walk in the front gate, that was a brand new bike taken off the assembly line, put in their collection in 1911, and it's remained there ever since. It's original paint, it's original plating, and that's really, really unique in corporate archives, that a company that early on had the foresight to save this amazing amount of machines, let alone the posters and all the photographic negatives and pins and watches and marketing literature and everything they've made in multiple languages. It's a stunning collection, but the motorcycle collection itself is second to none. So with over 500 motorcycles, in the collection, it's kind of an ongoing process to make sure that they're all in the best condition they can possibly be. Everything's stabilized. For years they moved the collection around. Our initial job was to get them back, kind of like assess what we have, and then begin the process of conservation, which is, in a nutshell, take them apart, clean every piece, and put it back together again. Robert Henri said an artist without an imagination is a mechanic. And so I like to consider what I do a bit of an art, trying to resurrect something and make it, literally what it once was, or trying to keep it what it once was for as long as possible. And there's science to it, because you're dealing with all these different materials that are affected by temperature and humidity and moisture and pestilence and all these different things in different ways. Iron likes things really dry, but rubber likes things really wet. So just the environment that we store them in, trying to find a happy medium there, is part of the job. So we're always monitoring and measuring what temperature and what humidity is. And we've got incredible HVAC at the museum. And so there's all kinds of stuff like that. And the other thing, what a lot of people don't realize is, this is a working collection. We use it to support the company in a lot of different ways. We do part fitment for service parts. If, maybe we get a different vendor that's making a brake line, being that we make parts, service parts, replacement parts that go way back in our catalog, we have the ability to take maybe a new vendor gives us a prototype piece, and we'll be able to fit it on several models. For instance, our standard solo seat, which you can see on a 1925 Harley J or a 1941 FL or on a 2009 Crossbones is the same exact seat pan made by the same company, made it in 1925, and they make it for us today. And you can go buy that part at a dealer. If their die wears out that stamps that pan and they make a new one, they'll bring us kind of a test pan, and we'll fit it on a 1925 and a 1941 and a 2009 Crossbones. And if it fits, we're good to go. And if it doesn't, we go back to the drawing board and make a different one and make changes, so we don't go produce 10,000 pieces of something that won't work. You're going to talk the talk, you walk the walk, and I like to walk the walk. I mean, these machines are fantastic, and I love to take something that's old and something that someone says like, oh my gosh, that should be in haul that to the junkyard and make it look like new again. And that's a really and even more so, one aspect I can't do at my Harley-Davidson job is we don't have bikes that run. So one really neat thing is to actually take something that is a solidly froze up piece of metal and make that live again. And so that's part of what I do at home. I love old motorcycles. I have 10 of them. I guess that's kind of a disease. I guess I'm really good at collecting them. I'm not good at selling them. And so I have my earliest being a 1914 single, which is a bike I actually rode across the country, coast to coast, in 2010. My next oldest bike is a 1915 twin, and I rode that across the country in 2016, coast to coast. And so I like to believe that not only do I make them live again, but we put them out on the road or on the racetrack. My 1915 I race with a group of guys, and I'm not good at it by any means, but I really love to do it. It's what I always describe as my golf racing vintage board track motorcycles. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of golf courses in the world, and a lot of people that play golf. And there's only a couple of people like, Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods. Most are guys that are out there hacking around on the weekend and, scoring a 120. But they do it every weekend because they love it. And that's kind of where I fall on the racing. I mean, I watch some of the people that are, out there racing today, and it's really a thrill and a treat to watch and see how great they are. I know I'll never, I race my whole life and I'll never master those skills, but it's unique. So I guess maybe I get my Jones on other ways. Like I said, I've rode both my early bikes across the country, and that's not a lot of people in the world can say they've put 7,000 miles on Harley-Davidson board trackers. That's what's so great about the museum, is that it really is a reflection of motorcycling in general. Motorcycle riding isn't getting on a bike by yourself. Well, for some people it might be, but getting on a bike and going from point A to point B, that's commuting. Motorcycling is a social phenomenon, and it has been since the beginning. People all think that like, oh, I'm going on this motorcycle tour, that it's a relatively new thing. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel sponsored a motorcycle tour of Wisconsin in 1907, and where people could get together and ride motorcycles together. And that's what people that are in motorcycle clubs or hog chapters or riding groups or whatever it may be, it's that social aspect where you get together and share stories and bond and have great experiences and share them together. And that for me is what really excites me about motorcycling. And that's what's so great about the museum, is it's we're not just we built this, we did this, aren't we a great company? It's like you get to learn about these people that are maybe kind of unsung in American or international history. They're incredible stories all on their own. Talking about like a Vivian Bales, think of an 18-year-old woman in the 1920s getting on a motorcycle and riding from Georgia up to Milwaukee by herself. And she couldn't even vote at the time, and she's going to get on and do this. I mean, like that's an amazing story and very inspiring, and that's just one of many that are there, and that's what makes us really a special place. How riding early bikes across the country came about. A guy by the name of, and a friend of mine who's no longer with us, Lonnie Isom Jr., came up to me one time. I think it was about 2008 or 9, and he said, "I'm thinking about doing a ride across the country, but it's all going to be on pre-1915 motorcycles. What do you think?" And I said, "I think you're crazy, but I'm totally in." And so I was, I think it was finally January of that year. He came of 2010, and he said, "Hey, we're going to do it. Are you in? It's $500, and you got to have a bike, and here's the rules." And so I think 70 some of us signed up. 44 of us showed up to the starting line in Kitty Hawk, and it had never been done, which was really so no one knew what to expect. Subsequently, they've done it every 2 years now. But that first year, there were guys that didn't make it out of the parking lot, and there were guys that had perfect scores and made it all the way across the country. Let's just say that what's going through your head when you're on something like you got a lot of time to think when you're going across America at 35 miles an hour. And you see everything, because the terrain changes. You might have a morning where you wake up and leave and it's 32 degrees, and by the end of the day you're in Oklahoma and it's 100 degrees. And so it was all on crazy back roads, and again that was all part of it. But the end of the night, when everybody's in the parking lot and they're working on their bikes and everybody's trying to help everybody get theirs going the next day so we could do it again, that's the things that I'll remember. The ride, I remember certain points of it, but boy, I remember those parking lots, and everybody just, "Did you see that today? Did you see this?" And just sharing the stories of the day, and there was nothing like it. And when you got to the end, we're on Santa Monica Pier, the people that came out to greet us, and Karen Davidson was there and gave me a big hug, and we shared some champagne, and it's just and what really made it special for me is our kids were homeschooled at the time, and were their whole lives, and so they came along as part of my pit crew, and my wife drove the support minivan, and the kids were there with it, and we all got together and worked on the bike at the end of the day. And it was, not only did I get to do it with a bunch of great people, I got to do it with my family as well. It's kind of cliche, and people say it, there's something about that feeling that when you get on, and people try and put it into words. Is it freedom? Is it independence? Is it all these things? When you boil it right down, for me, it's just fun. It's just like, I love to have fun no matter what I'm doing. And to a fault. People will be like, not everything's a joke. I believe humor belongs in music. I believe humor belongs in the worst possible situations that are happening. And, because it makes things fun. And that's what motorcycling really is to me. It's kind of weird. It's kind of maybe a cop-out answer, but, it's like, why do people go on roller coasters? Because they're fun.